And you know
Long
what?
time.
Let's jump ahead here. I was going to ask you about working with Larry on the Yes Symphonic tour. Um, to me, there was so much amazing music going on in that concert. Full orchestra, the Yes Band. I mean, the concept initially, if I remember correctly, was the orchestra was going to be in place with a keyboard player, but then when I came to see the show at the Hollywood Bowl, there you were. So working with Larry's arrangements and with the orchestra, how did that work?
I think that it's possible that Yes may have originally intended to have the orchestra replace the keyboards on the
Mm-hmm.
symphonic tour. That might have been in the conversation early on, but they pivoted pretty quickly on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they worked with Larry Groupé to arrange the classics with a really full orchestration in mind. And also he did the orchestrations for the new album that they were making at the time, Magnification. But when John Anderson called me to join the band, he specifically said, I want you playing everything,
Mm.
every single sound, every single part. Oh, and I hear that you sing too. So I want you to sing harmonies with the
Oh,
band at the
wow.
same time. And so I had my work cut out for me. But once we got together on the sound stage, it was really a great experience to hear the entire orchestra and band come together with the great work that Larry did.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal show. And anybody who missed one of the live concerts, there's a tremendous DVD, Yes Symphonic DVD. I think John has said that was an orchestra in Poland. Am I correct on that?
Yes, that was during the European leg of the tour, where for the first half of the tour, we had young orchestra from Poland who was on the DVD. And then in the second half of the tour, we had an orchestra from Belarus that was
Okay.
also excellent.
Yeah. Yeah, John spoke so highly of that orchestra, not only the way they played, but how much they enjoyed the music, right? I mean, and you watch the DVD, you see the strings rocking out. Everybody's having a great time. And there
Yeah.
you are with the guys I'm going to call the masters. How
Yeah,
much?
you gotta pay respect to my sideburns game from 2001. No, that is one of my favorite pictures, which is actually a capture from the DVD, I think.
I
And
think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and because for the most part, we every show, with certain exceptions, sometimes we'd play a different song in the set, but most of the set was intact each time, including where everybody went on the stage.
Hmm.
Mm.
And Chris started coming up to me during Ritual and Starship Trooper to interact with me because we
Hmm.
were having a good time, and
Yeah.
just seeing Chris Squire striding toward me on stage with his Rickenbacker bass, I was like, oh, well, okay, baby, it's on. Here we go. Here we go. So yeah, that was really exciting
Oh,
and
no
just a
doubt.
tremendous experience.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I think I've heard Chris referred to as the gentle giant. Such a kind man, amazing player. To me, one of the most fascinating things he did as a bass player is he would play these pedal tone notes that didn't necessarily fit the chord passage. It was floating over those notes, but he made it work. Always fascinated me. So when you got the call from John, and God bless John for listening to the tapes that are submitted to him and picking people that he thinks, yeah, this person would work well for this person for that. Um, how much time did you have to
Yeah, a
get all
couple
that
of
music
months
ready?
max, because I think originally, so I was in Meatloaf's band touring, and we were getting ready to record an album, which was eventually released a couple years later, called "Couldn't Have Said It Better." And when there was talk about, yes, possibly needing a keyboardist for a few select dates, and I think this was while maybe they were looking at reuniting with Rick Wakeman, but he was on a massive tour of his own, so he wasn't going to be available until 2002.
Wow.
So I was, but kind of getting extra bold with the management, saying, I grew up with Yes, I could do it. Like, what do you, I guess you have to throw your hat in the ring and then back it up.
Hmm.
So, because I mean, I saw this sliver of an opportunity, and they said, okay, start making a tape. But there was no timeline.
Hmm.
It was just, after you're back from the Meatloaf tour, you make a tape when you got some free time, and they'll take a look at it. That never happened. So I eventually got a different phone call that said change of plans. Yes is going out with an orchestra for the entire year of 2001, and we want to consider you on keyboards. So I had to make a different tape, which was they sent me a live recording from their previous tour of them playing two songs, two audition pieces. This is Yes. Each of those audition pieces was over 20 minutes long. So it was close to the edge and the gates of delirium.
Oh, my Lord.
I get it, because they went for the jugular, because I guess they figured if I could hang with that stuff, that I should be in good shape for the tour. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I recorded myself playing along and put my performance on the left speaker and put the tape that they gave me in the right speaker, so they could use the balance control and single me out and hear just what I was doing, and hear how I meshed with the recording. And based on that, they invited me to come visit them while they were recording Magnification. So that was like part 2 of the audition, was basically a hang. They didn't know me at all, and they wanted to see what I was all about. And, I 27, I kind of look like a skater, show up at the door, and they're like, yes, may we help you?
Are you the pizza delivery?
And so but it was a really good hang. And the fact that I was so familiar with this band and knew all the interviews and all the stories and knew the temperaments of the people in the band, it gave me a little bit of an assist when it came to just interacting and getting to know the guys in short conversation anyway.
Yeah, because I mean, you've already had the experience of touring a high profile artist already. So a lot of, there's different legs of the fence that you go through where, if you're an average fan and you get so starstruck by your heroes, it's like, you can't react. But then going through and being, having the professional chops, putting in the work and the dedication, and then putting in the time as a touring artist, you've already kind of gotten codified and put into this scenario. Now you get to move it to the next level with Yes. So I mean, I can only imagine that has kind of tempered your ability to react with all of these, what some would consider really high profile artists, and then become part of that family too.
Yeah, there's no place for just being just a starstruck fanboy or whatever. That doesn't get the job done. And like you said, I'm glad that my career was sort of progressing in the order that it did, because with Meatloaf, we were touring the world, and that was a big show and a challenging show for me on piano, because this was like Jerry Lee Lewis eighth notes all night.
Wow.
I looked like Popeye when I got back from the tour, and so but to have some years under my belt as a professional touring musician, got over all that star stuff. And I mean, I chuckled when I first heard them all talking to me, because I remember hearing their voices all of my life in interviews and on records. So I thought I was amused, and I was pinching myself a little bit, but there was no time to waste on that. It was like you asked before, I had maybe a couple of months to get ready, and less than that to get those audition pieces.
Wow.
Absolutely professional. That's awesome.
Brian asks also, did you put your own voice into the Yes Kansas cover tunes, or did you keep the original feel and parts?
As a baseline, not baseline, but as the foundation of
you play bass
of what
too?
I do. Yes, that's the international symbol for bass, by the way. You have to hold your hand up.
As opposed to.
Yeah, right. And no, my screen isn't reversed. I am left-handed. As a foundation, I want to get it true to the original, because it's fun for me to try to recreate that. And also, as a lifelong fan of certain albums myself, I have an attachment to the way things were played, the way things were sung, and the way things sound. So I want to start there and get it as close as I can. And to me, that's kind of like the price of admission. Once I can get that and build trust with the band, then they start giving me a little bit of rope and saying, and I have to pick my moments carefully, because I don't want to just be a photocopy of the record live,
Mhm.
because you could just go and listen to the album. So I want it to be familiar and true, but at the same time, I want people to realize that they're at a live show.
Mhm.
So I have to pick my moments to improvise, or to, even in subtle ways, if I interject a couple different chord qualities or chord voicings.
Right.
So that's where I stand on that.
Hmm. And at that point, you say, as you said, you sort of earned the trust of the band. So are they pretty lenient then when they hear something that obviously they're going to know it's a bit different? They're cool with that. Run with that.
Yeah, and again, with Yes, I didn't change much,
Hmm.
except for maybe a few lines in some solos, which is where you would expect them to be different, because even the various members of the band over the years have, for instance, the organ solo in Roundabout. You listen to all these different live Yes recordings. No one, including Rick Wakeman, plays the solo exactly
Hmm.
like it was on the album, because you got to be in the moment too. So I try to, again, balance the familiar with the fresh. And as far as Kansas goes, I also look at how each of the other band members approaches the parts. And so on a Kansas song like Hopelessly Human or Closet Chronicles, which is so intensely orchestrated, it makes a lot of sense to try to nail it as the record
Right.
does. But there are also a couple licks and solos that this song wouldn't suffer if I just threw in a little left turn here and there.
Right.
And being an actual legit member of Kansas,
Hmm.
from the moment I joined, they've also given me that seal of approval and that
Right.
trust that I'm going to take care of this position.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, it reminded me of the other side of that coin, and that is, of course, the fans that grew up listening to the studio albums. They're going to come expecting certain parts because they've got them in their heads already.
Yeah, and that's one of the questions that I asked myself. I said, what would I want to hear if I was in the audience? Because I have been in the audience many times, and there have been
Right.
times where I've been like, yeah, all right, and then sometimes be like, I don't know what's going on here, like
Palette. So let's start with Rick Wakeman.
Rick Wakeman was the player that I first heard that showed that the job of a keyboardist in a band is to play a wide palette of sounds. You weren't just the piano player, weren't just the organist. He had strings over here from the mellotron. He had mini Moog sounds. He had the piano. He had the organ. So the orchestration aspect of it is really what influenced me. Now, a lot of people who are into Rick were attracted by the fast
Hmm.
qualities, the fast fingers, and that's fun too. But to me, when I hear Heart of the Sunrise and hear those mellotron strings coming in, that's like, to me, the quintessential Rick Wakeman influence for me.
Okay. Fantastic. Keith Emerson, one more, and then we've got a bunch of more great questions. Patrick Moraz.
Patrick Moraz is an interesting influence for me because I was getting into Chick Corea also as a teenager. Rest in
Okay.
peace. One of my
Yes.
favorites of all
Amen.
time. And when I heard, because I heard the Yes music with Patrick, the Relayer era, much later in life than hearing Fragile and Close to the Edge when I was 6 years old,
Hmm.
7 years old. And this Relayer was a different animal.
Yeah.
And I was hearing the Chick Corea influence. I was like, you're bringing some jazz. I just thought of it as a whole other world. And here he is bringing some jazz into the prog. So that stuck with me, and I've actually played with Patrick a couple times. He sat in with Renaissance, and we had some fun keyboard conversations on stage. Some would call it a duel. I like to call it a conversation, and we had a great time. And he's been a big supporter of my solo music as well. He's been a good advocate for that. So
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. I